Welcome to my 14-day SAT prep series. Today is day 7 of 14, and today we're going to cover pacing for all 4 sections of the SAT. So that means we're going to cover the math no calculator section, the math with calculator section, the reading section, and the writing section. After we cover pacing for those 4 sections, I'm going to do a walkthrough of an SAT writing practice test. So you'll see me use the pacing I recommend in the SAT writing pacing that I discuss today. You'll see me implement that in the 35 minutes I have to complete that passage. So as I go through, I'll be showing you an inside look at what I look for on the SAT writing section and how I manage my time if I were to take it like I were taking the real SAT writing section. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's start with pacing the math no calculator section. So, things we need to understand with the math no calculator section. The first thing we need to understand is how the difficulty of the questions is arranged. So, the difficulty of each question increases, right? So as we go from questions 1 through 15, which are the multiple choice parts of the math without calculator section, the questions are going to get increasingly difficult. So you're going to have your easier questions are going to be right around 1, and your most difficult are going to be around 15. So then after that, we're going to switch over to the free response questions. So these are going to be the ones where you have to fill in the bubbles for your answer. So this isn't the multiple choice, but this is now you have to come up with the answer yourself. So questions 16 to 20 are where that start, and it starts once again back at that fairly easy difficulty level, like with questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then as we get to question 20, it's going to get more difficult as we go on. So I wrote, after studying a few of the practice tests, or after studying all of the practice tests, here's what I came up with as far as my view on how the difficult equivalencies are for the multiple choice versus the free response. And you'll see why this is important as I get on and move on through this pacing video. So in my opinion, question 16 of the free response was equivalent in difficulty to usually questions 1 through 6 on the multiple choice. Question 17 of the free response was usually equivalent to about questions 4 through 9 of the multiple choice as far as difficulty. Question 18's difficulty was usually comparable to 6 through 10 of the multiple choice. Question 19's difficulty was usually comparable to 8 through 12 of the multiple choice. And questions 20 difficulty was generally comparable to questions 9 through 12 of the multiple choice. Now, you may notice something. Where are questions 13 to 15? Well, questions 13 to 15 of the multiple choice tended to be the most difficult and tended to be more difficult than even the hardest of the free response questions. So how is this going to impact our strategy? Because that's what we really want to focus on. How does understanding this difficulty equivalencies between the free response and the multiple choice section help us improve our test score? Because that's really all that matters here. Well, we want to answer our easiest questions first. Why? Because each question gives us the same amount of points if we get it right on the SAT math section. Thus, we want to answer our easiest questions first and lock down those easy points. Also, by doing that, we're going to avoid wasting too much time by doing that, obviously, we're going to avoid wasting time trying to solve a problem we might not fix, but at the same time, while we want to answer those easiest questions first, one thing that involves answering those easiest questions first is even though we want to answer the easiest questions first, that doesn't mean that we want to just keep flipping back and forth between the free response and the multiple choice sections, right? So we don't want to just keep going back and forth between the free response and multiple choice, because that would waste time flipping between pages. So it's a balance between the two. So here's my suggested approach, and the approach I used when I scored perfectly on back-to-back SATs for the math section. So the first thing that I would do is I would answer the multiple choice questions 1 through 9, and that's the first thing I recommend you do as well. So why are we going to answer multiple choice questions 1 through 9 first? Well, let's take a look at our difficulty equivalencies. We know questions 1 through 9 tend to be fairly easy on the SAT math without calculator section. 1 through 9 are going to be fairly easy, and we also see that as far as the difficulty equivalencies, they're generally equivalent to about 16 through 18. So we're going to answer 1 through 9 because they're going to be fairly easy, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Then after we do that, we're going to go answer the free response questions 16 through 18. Okay, so at that point, we've kind of knocked out most of those easy questions on the 1 through 9 and then on 16 through 18. So where do we go after answering question 18? Well, if you look at the difficulty equivalencies, we know question 19 is generally equal to questions 8 through 12, and questions 20 is generally equal to 9 through 12. So which one would we want to do first between those two? Well, this is where a little bit of judgment comes in. So after we answer question 18 on the free response, you want to glance at 19 and 20. If they look easy to you, then you're going to want to go ahead and do them next. Then after you do them, you would go back and you'd answer 10 through 15 in that order. Now, if they look difficult and they look like they're going to take a long time to solve, or you're not sure how to solve them, then go back and do 10 to 12 next. Then after you answer number 12 though, okay, so in this case, you didn't do 19 and 20, and in case B, you didn't do 19 and 20 yet. They looked difficult, so you went back and you did 10 to 12. After you do 12 though, then I recommend going back and answering 19 and 20. If you do know how to do them, they just look like they took a while to solve, before answering 13 to 15, because 13 and 15, once again, tend to be the most difficult questions on the SAT math without calculator section. Okay, so why is this approach smart and why do we want to use it? Well, what it's going to do is it's going to maximize our chances at points, since answering questions 1, 2, or 3, which are really easy, gives us the same amount of points as answering question 15 correct when question 15 is usually really, really difficult. So it's going to prevent you from running out of time as well while working on a hard problem, right? If you were to start answering questions 13 through 15 before you answered questions 16 through 18, then what that's going to do is it's going to mean you're working on harder problems before easier problems, and you could end up running out of time working on the harder problems and leaving more points on the table. So those are the big 3 reasons. Also, it's really efficient, as I discussed in 2 and in number 1 here. So a couple things, just one side note. I know some people are shooting for perfect scores. If you're shooting for a perfect score and think that you'll never see a question that you don't know, you should still use this strategy. Why should you still use this strategy? Well, a couple of reasons. Right, you should still use this strategy because number 1, even if you're shooting for a perfect score, understand that anything above a 1550s is still really good, and you don't want to put all that pressure on yourself to score perfectly. And at the same time, even if you are looking to score perfectly, and if you are looking to score perfectly good, you should still use this strategy, because what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that you're not stuck on one problem too long. It's going to make sure you're getting those easy ones out of the way, and by doing that, what's really going to help you is that you're going to know exactly how much time you have left on those hard problems. So if you knock out those easy ones and you're like, okay, I'm doing perfect so far, then you've got these couple of hard ones left at the end, and you know exactly how much time you have to work through them. Whereas if you were to do it the other way around and start working on the hard problems, and say you overestimated or your ability on those easier problems, and you thought you could get all those easier problems done much faster, and you took too long on the hard problems, then you're going to run into problems. So this is definitely the approach for you if you are shooting for a perfect score or just shooting for a score in general. I highly recommend this approach. I think it's in my opinion, it is by far the best approach for the math without calculator section, as far as being efficient and maximizing your chances to score highly, no matter what score you're shooting for. All right, so how much time should you have left after you answer all the questions? So let's say that you've answered all your questions. About how much time should you have left to check your work? So in my opinion, I recommend having 10 to 8 minutes left to check your work if possible. Right, if you've got anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes left to go back through, check your work, make sure that all your answers are correct, then that's going to be really ideal for you, especially if you're shooting for anything above 1400 in my opinion. So let's say that you can't finish that quickly, right? Some people take longer with math. That's okay. But at least try to have all your answers or all your questions answered with 5 minutes left, because then you got 5 minutes to go back and check your work on any problems that you starred as wanting to go back and check your work or that you were unsure of. So what to check in the final minutes, right? So let's say that you've gone through and you've answered all your questions. Well, what you're going to want to do then is, if you had any problems, the first thing you want to do, right, and we can put check work is just kind of, I'm referring to if you don't have anything you're unsure of. Obviously, the first thing you're going to want to do here, so I'll just go ahead and put a 0 step right here, or I'll put it right here so you can see it bigger. First thing you want to do is you want to go through anything that you starred as being unsure of. So anything you starred as being unsure of, or anything that you hadn't answered yet or that you didn't know how to do, go back and try to do those first. Okay, so anything you start as being unsure of or you didn't know how to do, go back and try to do those first after you've answered all the rest of them. Next thing you want to do after that, after you've gone through and answered the ones you were unsure of or that you didn't know, is you're going to want to make sure that your bubble sheet matches what you have in your test booklet. Now, that's if the SAT is paper pencil. If it changes to online in the future, then I'm guessing you're just going to have your answers on that same test booklet page or of the website is my guess. You won't have to worry about this step. And then finally, after that, you're going to want to go back and check your work. Okay, so you're going through, you do your initial thing, hopefully you answer all of them. If not, then you go back and you answer the ones that you were unsure of or you didn't know. After that, you make sure that what you put in on your bubble sheet matches what you have in your test booklet. That should only take you about 30 seconds to a minute at most. And then after that, you go back and you check more work. So be careful of trying to change the answer with less than a minute left. Okay, if there's less than 1 minute left and it's paper pencil, you got to be careful, because you're going to have to erase and fill in the bubble, and you don't want to end up getting in a situation where you erased and didn't have time to fill in the other bubble. Okay, also the importance of having a watch on the SAT. Okay, keep in mind your watch has to be mechanical, it can't make noises, but you can indeed have a watch on the SAT, and you really should, because you are not guaranteed to have a clock in your testing site. So you need to make sure you have a watch. My opinion is always set it at noon every time at the start of every section, so you know exactly how much time you've taken up and how much time you have left. Next thing, I do use a bubbling strategy when I take the SAT, and I recommend you do as well. So obviously this is in case the SAT is paper pencil, which it is currently, but in the future it may move to online, in which case you can disregard this because it'll probably be just clicking your answer on your test booklet anyways. So yes, there's a bubbling strategy. Yes, I'm a try hard. I recommend circling your answer in your test booklet. and then once you've answered all the questions on that page of your test booklet, then bubble them in. Okay, so for example, let's say we had 3 questions in my test booklet. Let's say my answers were A for one, C for the next one, and D for the next one. Then once I answered all those questions on that page, I would just go bubble in A, then I'd bubble in C, and then I'd bubble in D. Okay, so that's just going to save me a little bit of time because I'm only switching back and forth from my test booklet to my answer sheet once every 3 questions or so, rather than once every question. All right, so watch the time as you get towards the end. Once there's less than 8 minutes left, make sure that you're filling in the bubble sheet after each question, right? So that bubbling strategy, use it till there's about 8 minutes left. Then at that point, make sure you're filling in the bubble sheet after each question, so that way you're not in a situation where you have 3 answers in your test booklet and you forget, and you run out of time and aren't able to put all 3 of those in your bubble sheet. All right, so with that takes care of our pacing video for the math without calculator section. Now let's go ahead and move into the math with calculator sections pacing. So pacing the math with calculator section, let's go ahead and talk about this. So let's go ahead and run through this little presentation I have here. So we have understanding how the difficulty of questions is arranged. So the way that you're going to want to manage your time with the math with calculator section, it's similar as far as the structure behind the reasons why I do it as with the math without calculator section, as far as question difficulty equivalencies between the multiple choice and free response. So big difference is that the free response, there's 8 questions rather than 5. Multiple choice, there's going to be 30 questions multiple choice. So let's go ahead and run through the difficulty equivalencies here. So questions are going to increase in difficulty from 1 to 30. That's going to be the multiple choice. And then at question 31, it's going to go back down to a lower to medium difficulty level and then increase in difficulty as you go from 31 to 38. So my opinion on the equivalencies, multiple choice 1 through 16, I believe is equal to questions 31 to 32 on the free response, 33 to 34 free response, 8 to 20 on multiple choice, 35 to 36 free response, 10 to 25 multiple choice, so 37 to 38 on the free response are going to be 16 to 25 multiple choice. Once again, we have the last part of the multiple choice being the most difficult of the test, and that's going to be questions 24 to 30 in my opinion. So how is this going to impact our strategy? Like I talked about earlier in today's video, we want to answer those easier questions first. We also at the same time want to make sure we're avoiding wasting too much time flipping between free response and multiple choice sections. So my suggested approach, the approach that got me a perfect score on the math section on back-to-back SATs, is answering multiple choice questions 1 through 18 as your first step. So this is going to take you from the really easy ones to pretty much the mid difficulty questions. So you're going to answer your easy ones all the way up to your mid difficulty ones, and then at that point you're going to take a look at questions 19 through 22 of the multiple choice, and if they look easy to you, go ahead and do them next. If they look difficult, then come back to them after step 3. So what's step 3? Well, that's going to be free response questions 31 to 35. Free response questions 31 to 35 tend to be an easy difficulty to a mid difficulty. So just like questions 1 through 18 were, similar to 19 and 22 as well. So the reason that I recommend taking a look at 19 to 22, and if they look easy, going ahead and doing them, is just because it's going to save you time from flipping back and forth between free response and multiple choice. Now, if you look at 19 to 22 and they look difficult, then of course go to 31 and 35 because they're probably going to be easier for you at least. Okay, so after that point, then what you're going to do is after you answer 31 to 35, you're going to take a look at 36 to 38. Now, if 36 to 38 look easy to you, go ahead and do them. If they look difficult, then come back to them after step 5. So what's step 5? Well, step 5 would be if they look difficult, then go answer the rest of your multiple choice. And then after you're done answering the rest of your multiple choice, then go back to your free response if you didn't answer 36 to 38. Okay, so you're going to want to put kind of this step-by-step approach down in your notes. Same thing with the math without calculator section. If you didn't put that in your notes, this sort of outline and how I recommend pacing as far as questions, I'd recommend putting that in your notes if you haven't. So all the way from right here down to where the other arrow is pointing. So steps 1 through 5 there. All right, so why is this approach smart? Once again, like I talked about, you get the same amount of points for answering those easy questions as those difficult ones. You want to answer the easy ones first, preventing you from running out of time while working on a hard problem. You don't want to leave any points on the table. You want to answer those easy ones first. It's efficient. Okay, if you're shooting for a perfect score, once again, this is a strategy for you as well. Understand, for everyone, this is the strategy you should be using in my opinion. This is what I used when I scored perfectly on the math section. This is what I recommend you use no matter what score you're shooting for. So how much time should you have left after answering all the questions? So for this one, you have a total of 55 minutes on the SAT math with calculator section. You should try to aim to have about 20 to 15 minutes left at the end to check your work if possible. Now, obviously, if you can't finish that quickly, then at least try to have all your questions answered with 10 minutes left. Okay, because that would be ideal. That way you can go back and check any of them you were unsure of. So what to check in the final minutes? So once again, obviously as a 0 step, anything that you were unsure of or that you had to skip or not answer yet, so unsure of or didn't answer or skipped, go back and do those ones first. Okay, after you've gone through and you've answered those ones you were unsure of or you didn't answer, then you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that your bubble sheet matches what's in your test booklet. Okay, because you don't want to end up in a scenario where all your things in your bubble sheet are off by one place. Okay, because then you're going to end up getting like 10 questions wrong. So that's why you want to make sure you check and make sure that what's in your bubble sheet matches your answers in your test booklet. That should only take you about 1 minute for the math with calculator section. Because you should be able to use that bubbling strategy I talked about before. Once again, I have that bubbling strategy on this page. I already talked about it though, and it's the same thing for the SAT math with calculator section as without, so I'm not going to touch on it right here because I already did. Okay, and then obviously after you match that bubble sheet to the test booklet, check your work. Okay, if the SAT is online, you don't really have to worry about this part right here with the test booklet and the bubble sheet because it'll probably just be clicking the answer. All right, once again, being careful to change the answer with less than 1 minute left. So you want to make sure you have a watch so you know exactly how much time you have left. So those are 2 big things there. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and move into pacing for the SAT. We'll do the reading section next, so the SAT reading section. So pacing the SAT reading section, what do we need to know about the SAT reading section in order to pace it correctly? So a couple brief things just as far as an overview. 52 questions, as you know, 65 minutes total. Average that out to 1.25 minutes per question. 13 minutes per question set on average. 5 passages total. We got 1 social studies and 1 history is what that should say. Okay, 1 social studies. Switch that over. Okay, we've got 1 social, see if I can switch it. There we go. Okay, 1 social studies and 1 history passage is what it is most of the time. All right, then we got 2 science passages, 1 United States or global literature passage. Usually one of the passages on the SAT reading section consists of 2 passages, right? As I talked about, I believe it was in yesterday's video I talked about that. You'll need to compare, contrast, and analyze those 2 passages, compare them to each other, things like that. So successful strategies on the reading section as far as pacing. So multiple approaches for everyone. Everyone's different. At the same time, here's the strategy I recommend as someone who scored 1590 on the SAT. This is what I think is going to work for most people. Okay, it's what worked for me, and it's what I think works for most people. The order that you read the passages in is going to matter significantly. Okay, and here's why. If you're really, really good at science passages, you want to do those first. Why do you want to do those first? Well, you want to do those science passages first because it's where you're likely to get the most points since you're really good at them. If you're really bad at the literature passage, you're going to want to do that last. That way you make sure you're securing those easy points. You always want to secure easy points on the SAT first. So you want to make sure that over time, if you know, and since this is the 14-day SAT prep course and not the 90-day, you are still going to take a practice test, so you can use that. If you know already that you're better at science passages, make sure you do those first because those are going to be easier for you and you're going to be able to lock up points. If you know that you're better at the literature passage, do those first. Okay. If you don't know which ones you're better at right now, I do have it set up for a practice test to be taken during these 14 days on one of the days. So you will be able to use data from that as well to see which ones you're scoring higher on. But if you already know, then that's going to be helpful for when you take that practice test as well. All right, so practice passages, you can also use those to tell which ones you're better at as well. But yeah, always go from the easiest passages to the hardest passages. Okay, so that means just understanding which passages you're better at. If you're better at science, start with those. If you're better at history, start with those. If you're better at social science, start with that. So always go easiest to hardest for you. Okay, next up, reading the passage. Okay, so now you've picked, let's say science was your easier one, so you're starting with the science passage. So you find the science passage, now you're going to read the passage. So as you read through, don't skip lines. Don't try to predict what is going to be said, and keep in mind your feelings about the text don't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter if you like the text, don't like the text. Your opinion does not matter. Okay, next thing, do not reread on your first read through. So if something is a little bit confusing, don't reread on your first read through. And I know that that might not make sense right off the bat, but here's why. If you reread something on the reading section on your first read through and it ends up not being important, then you just wasted your time rereading it. So that's why I say don't reread on your first read through. Okay, next thing. Write little to no notes. Once again, that might seem counterintuitive and like it doesn't make sense, but here's why. What you want to do is as you're reading, here's what you want to do. You want to underline things. If the SAT's paper pencil, you're going to want to underline the things that are important. So I talked about this in yesterday's SAT reading section videos, right? So for a science section, for example, you're going to want to identify the driving part behind the investigation or the lab or the experiment. You're going to want to avoid underlining the evidence because then you're going to end up underlining the whole thing. But you're going to want to underline claims as well, right? So I talked about the things that you should underline and things like that in the practice with the passages. But you don't want to write things like large annotations, right? You don't want to start writing sentences as you're reading through your passage because you don't know which parts of the passage are going to be asked about yet. Okay, so you're going to want to just keep it keep making sure that you're just always reading through. Okay, if you're constantly reading and you're just underlining things that you find important, circling things, that's fine. But just make sure you're always reading. Okay. Fourth thing, stay interested. You gotta stay interested in the text. If you're interested in the text, you're gonna remember it better and you're gonna understand it better. So even if it's the most boring topic in the world, you need to try to stay interested. If you can engage yourself in the text, it's gonna help you a lot in the reading section. All right, so now let's talk pacing. Okay, so pacing. Here's my recommended pacing strategy and the pacing strategy I used for the SAT reading section. So first thing, obviously doing that initial read through the passage like I've done and showed you. Also making any annotations, right, at the same time. By annotations, I just mean those underlining, those circle, anything you want to square, star, things like that, but always keeping on reading. Okay, that should take less than 4 minutes. Okay, if you can get that done in less than 4 minutes, you're in a really, really good spot for the SAT reading section. If you can get it done in about 3 to 3.5 minutes, then you're in a fantastic spot. Now, the difference between 4 minutes and 3 minutes isn't huge, so it's not a big deal if it takes you 4 minutes. But if you are getting it done in 3 to 3.5, don't worry, that's fantastic as well. Okay, aim to answer all the questions on one passage in 9 minutes to 11 minutes. So why? Why if it averages out to 13 minutes total, why do we want to answer all the questions on one passage in 9 minutes to 11 minutes? Well, that's going to give us a total then of about anywhere from 20 minutes to 10 minutes at the end. Come back and check our work or check questions that we skipped or were unsure of. Okay, so that's why we want to do that. Now, keep in mind, obviously I already covered C, doing the passages that are in the order that are easiest to you. Now, as far as skipping questions, let's touch on that real quick. So we're going to do the passages in the order they're easiest to you. Then we're going to answer the questions in the order they appear in each passage. So we're not going to go question hunting within a certain passage in the question sets. So for example, let's say that passage 1 had questions 1 through 10. We're not going to go jumping and starting at 10 or starting at 8. We're just going to go through in the order they appear in each passage. Okay, now skipping questions. When are you going to want to skip questions? You're going to want to skip questions you feel very unsure of after 30 seconds. Okay, if you're really unsure of it after 30 seconds, go ahead and skip it. Okay, now if you're going to skip it, make sure you star it so you can come back to it at the end. So star any skipped questions in your test booklet. That way you have time at the end, you can come back to them. Next thing, try not to skip more than 3 questions per passage, and here's why. If you're skipping more than 3 questions per passage and you're taking 9 minutes to 11 minutes, it's going to be tough for you to answer all of those questions at the end. Okay, because if you're skipping 4 questions a passage, then there's 5 passages. That means you skipped 20 questions, and if you've only got 10 minutes at the end, you're not going to be able to answer all those. So try not to skip more than 3 questions per passage. Another thing is too, if you're skipping more than 3 questions per passage and you're going on to the next passage, then you're going to have read 5 passages, and you're going to have to go back to a passage you read 40 minutes ago and try to remember what it said to answer those other questions. So try not to skip more than 3 questions per passage. If you read through a question a second time and you still don't know what it's asking, or then you're going to want to skip that one because it's going to be tough for you to figure it out if you haven't figured it out after 2 read-throughs of it. So skip it, star it, come back to it at the end. So what to check in the final minutes. So you've gone through, you've answered your questions. Obviously, once again, the 0 step here. Once you've gone through, if there's any questions that you were unsure of or any questions that you have not answered, obviously you want to answer every question. So anything you were unsure of or haven't answered, go back and answer those. Okay, so any of those starred questions, go back and do those. After you've done that, you're going to want to check your bubble sheet. Make sure your bubble sheet matches what's in your booklet. Since there's 52 questions on the SAT reading section, that'll probably take you anywhere from 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. Okay, so not much time at all. You can probably get it done in 1 minute or less, is my guess. And then as far as going to skipped questions, right? So obviously, skipped questions, unsure questions. Some people, it's really up to you if you want to match your bubble sheet to your test booklet before checking them. It's really your call on that one. So I would say probably go to the ones that you're unsure of and the ones that you have skipped before checking your bubble sheet and matching it to your booklet, but it's really all going to depend on how much time you have left, and it's really your call on that one. Okay, you want to make sure that you check as many questions as you can. Okay, so let's say that you've gone through, you finished your read through and you had, like, let's say 6 questions that you had starred as being unsure of or that you didn't answer yet. You go back, you answer those. After that, you match your bubble sheet to your test booklet. That's only going to take you about a minute, so that's not really a huge step. Then after that, you can check as many questions as you can. So once you're done, right, you've answered all your questions. Let's say there's 10 minutes left. You don't want to stop. Never stop on the SAT, ever, ever. Never stop. You want to use that anytime that you're given. Even if you've answered all the questions and you feel comfortable, go back and check work, check work, check work, check work, check work, check work, check work. Always. You want to use all the time that they're giving you because it's crucial. You want to avoid any simple mistake because you only get to take this test usually like once every month or once every 2 months. So you don't want to mess it up. You want to score as high as you can because if you are taking it, you're making a big time commit and you got to sit there anyway. If you got to sit there for 10 minutes anyway between sections while you wait for your section to end, And while you wait for your section to end, make sure that you're going through and you're utilizing all the time they're giving you. All right, so be careful of trying to change an answer with less than 1 minute. Once again, obviously the bubbling strategy, same thing here as with the math section, so we can go ahead and skip over that and move on to the pacing with the SAT writing section. So for pacing the SAT writing and language section, let's go ahead and talk about that now. So we have the amount of time that we're given is 35 minutes. We have to answer 44 questions in that amount of time. So that means our time per question on average, if we don't have any time at the end to check our work, is going to be 47.7 seconds per question. So what is my recommended strategy for this? Well, as we go through the SAT writing section, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to quickly read through the passages. But as you read, you're reading for things like tense, for singular or plural subjects and verbs, for parallelism, for the order of ideas, for modifiers, for identifying independent and dependent clauses, for looking at relationships between ideas, sentences, and paragraphs, and etc. So you're not looking at it the same way you look at it as the reading section. You want to look at it looking for these sorts of things, because these are the types of things that are going to help you answer questions correctly. Okay, next thing, if you see a 1 at the start of a paragraph, then find which sentence you're being asked to place. So by 1 here, I'm talking about if there's a 1 placed next to the first sentence. If there's a 1 placed above a paragraph, it means you're going to be asked something about something being placed at different paragraphs or the order of paragraphs. If you have a 1 next to the start of the paragraphs and you have your sentences numbered out within that paragraph, then what you want to do is you want to go find the sentence which you're asked to being placed. Okay, so there's going to be some question then that asks you to place a sentence within that paragraph, or move a sentence, or whether a sentence should be kept or deleted or something like that. So you want to go find that question first whenever you see a 1 at the start of a paragraph. Okay, and here's why. Okay, what you can then do when you know what sentence you have to put in, or say that there's a sentence you have to put in and they want to know which sentence you should put it in after. What you can do is you can take a look at that sentence and come up with what should come before it and what should come after it. And then by doing that, you're able to place it as you read through the paragraph. Because then as you read through the paragraph, you see, oh, this is what I thought should come before it, this is what just came up in the paragraph, this is what I thought should come after it, and that's what just came after that sentence of what I thought should come before it, thus I place it here. That way you don't have to reread the paragraph twice. Okay, so that's going to save you time. So then as you read through that paragraph, answer any questions contained in the paragraph as they came up while keeping the sentence that you must place in mind. So that's how you're going to approach that type of question. So I wanted to put that there as well. All right, so some questions that require you to read on before answering them. So there are going to be some questions on the SAT writing section where you need to get a little bit more context before you're able to answer them. So as you go through the SAT writing section, you're answering questions, you come across one that you need to read more to get more context before you can answer it. So some questions that you're going to need more context on before you answer them are generally going to look like this. Which choice best introduces or transitions or contrasts, compares the previous paragraph with the next paragraph, right? That'll come at like the beginning of a paragraph, but you don't know what your new paragraph's about, so you have to continue reading the paragraph in order to answer that one correctly. Next thing, another example where you're going to probably need some more context are, should this sentence be kept, added, or deleted? Any question that asks something like that, you're going to need to read on to what the next sentence after that is. That way you know if you need the sentence to provide context for the future sentence that comes right after it. Next thing, another one would be something that says which choice introduces the information that follows it, right? You need to know the information that follows it, so you're going to have to read on. Next one, which choice is consistent with the writing that follows it? Once again, writing that follows it indicates you need to read on a little bit more before you can answer that question. In this case, read on and answer all the questions that you can as you read ahead, and once you have the information that you needed to answer the initial question, then you go back and answer that question. Okay, so that one right there. I'll give you about 10 seconds just to take that in a minute, just because I think that was a little bit rushed. Okay, now let's go ahead and continue. So going through the passages in order, okay? So there's not the same thing with the SAT reading section where you can know you're better at science passages and do those first. You're just going to want to go through the passages order 1 through 4 because there's really no predicting on this one. All right, next thing, you want to go through the questions as you see them, right? So going through the questions as you see them, obviously if you come across one where you need more context, then you're going to go ahead and have to continue on before you answer it. And then as you continue on, answer questions, and then once you have enough context to go back and answer it, then go back and answer it. Also with questions where you have to place a sentence, right? Obviously you're going to do those by looking at that question first before you start reading on through that paragraph. But other than that, you're just going to go through the questions as you see them. Okay, this helps you avoid having to reread the text by doing this. Try to answer all the questions in 25 to 30 minutes. If you can answer all your questions in 25 to 30 minutes, that's going to leave you with 5 to 10 minutes at the end. Go back and check any questions you were unsure of or that you hadn't answered yet. So that's going to be ideal there. So that's going to be about 34 seconds to 41 seconds per question on average, which sounds fast, but once you start recognizing the sort of tips, tricks, patterns like that in the SAT writing section, it's really not too bad. This is going to leave you with 5 to 10 minutes to check your answer sheet and your work. So final minutes, obviously first priority is going to be any questions you haven't answered yet. So first priority, obviously, any questions you have not answered yet or that you're unsure of or unanswered, go back and answer those and get an answer choice that you're sure of. Unanswered. Okay, so that's first priority. Then after that, you're going to make sure that your bubble sheet matches your test booklet. Okay, that way you make sure that you have, because if you end up having a one spot missed on your test or your bubble sheet, it's going to end up throwing off whatever comes after it off. So that's why you want to make sure that what's in your booklet matches your bubble sheet, because that's going to prevent you from absolutely bombing by missing one spot and then having everything off by one. So yeah, steps 1 and 2, matching the bubble sheet. Obviously that should take less than a minute. That should be pretty quick, especially with the writing section. Since it's only 44 questions, you should be able to get that done in less than a minute. All right, and then checking the questions that you're most unsure of first, as I talked about right here, those unsure of questions, unanswered ones, work through those first. All right, and then once again, being careful to change your answer with anything less than a minute. Make sure you have a watch, and then once again, that same bubbling strategy I talked about before. All right, so with that, that takes care of our pacing for today. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to play me going through an SAT writing and language practice test as I would if it were the real SAT. So what you're going to see is you're going to see me, I'm still going to provide answer explanations because I still want you to sort of see what I'm looking for as well. It'll be a little bit less in depth than it has been just because I'm also trying to show you the pacing at the same time. So you'll be seeing me go through it similar to how I would if I were taking the real SAT. So I'll pretty much use the same pacing I use here. I will obviously be having to give verbal answer explanations at the same time, so that'll slow me down a little bit, but I'll still definitely get it done in 25 to 30 minutes, no problem. But yeah, so you're going to be seeing me go through that. That's going to start playing when this pacing the writing and language section screen goes away. You'll see that video start playing. So pay attention as I go through there to both my pacing as well as the order of questions I do, as well as what I look for, things like that. So it'd be good to have a notebook out so you can sort of take notes on what I'm doing as well. And with that, make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't yet. And let's go ahead and get started with that part of today's lesson. All right, let's go ahead and get started with this writing section. So I'll be completing this in 35 minutes, treating it just like I were if I were taking the SAT. All right, so we have NASA, a space program with down-to-earth benefits. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, is a U.S. government agency whose budget is frequently contested. Okay, many times is repeating the word frequently, so I don't want to use it, or oftentimes, or repeatedly. My answer there would be D for number 1. All right, moving on, we got question 2. We have many people think of NASA's programs as trivial. In truth, the agency has a widespread positive effect on society. Okay, that's the correct use of the word effect. We want to use the E because we're using it here not as a verb. A verb would be having an A there. Now, we wouldn't say effect to society. We would say effect on society. So our correct answer for 2 there is going to be A. I'm going to move on. We've got question 3. By serving as a catalyst for innovation and scientific understanding, we're going to have creating jobs. I know we're going to have creating jobs because I see we're testing parallelism. So we're going to have creating jobs because we have showing there, and above it we also had an ing verb under serving as a catalyst. So serving was my indication of parallelism there. So B would be my answer for number 3. Okay, at this point we got question 4. In 1958, the program's first year, very few people believed that it was even possible for a manned spacecraft to leave the atmosphere and orbit Earth, but by initiating and collaborating on projects such as the Apollo moon missions, the Space Shuttle program, the Hubble Space Telescope, and unmanned planetary exploration, NASA has continually challenged its scientists and engineers to do things that were previously thought impossible. Okay, that one right there, we just have a list. That's the correct way to format a list. We would not use a semicolon anywhere in that list, so those are incorrect, and we need that comma before and, so D is incorrect. A would be our correct answer for 4. All right, now we got 5. All along, these NASA projects have greatly increased international cooperation. We're asked for which choice most effectively sets up a list of examples that follows in the next sentence, so I need to know that list. So we have a short list of inventions elaborated by NASA. It should be inventions that are developed by NASA, okay, not evolved, not elaborated. We'd be looking for the word developed there, so our answer for 6 should be C. They are projects that are developed or inventions that are developed by NASA. Includes communication satellites, invisible braces, and cordless tools. Okay, what are those examples of? Well, they're not examples of international cooperation, okay, so we can get rid of that. Garnering national publicity for the agency, not really. That's not really what we're looking at here. Communication satellites and invisible braces, are those new technology? Is that forms of new technology that they are generating? Yes. Okay, those are new forms of technology that are generated by NASA. There are multiple of them, or in other words, a steady stream of them. So our correct answer there should be C, and it doesn't say anything about them making a lot of money, so D would be incorrect there. So 5 should be C. All right, so we have all these inventions spawn. Okay, inventions is plural. We need plural verb, which would be spawn, new industries. Okay, so our correct answer, it looks like we're looking at tense here. Okay, so at first I thought we were just looking at matching our number, but it looks like we have to answer tense as well. Okay, up here I see that I have developed. Okay, so that's past tense. So I'm going to look for past tense verb here. I see I have spawn, which is answer choice B. So my answer then for 7 would be B. All right, now we can go ahead and move on. So I'll go ahead and read the rest here. So we've got NASA also sponsors small business innovation research and small business technology transfer programs, which are specifically designed to support technological development in the private sector. I see I have a 1. Okay, I'm asked to make this paragraph logical. Sentence 1 should be placed where? Sentence 1 reads, a report by the Space Foundation estimated that NASA contributed $180 billion to the economy in 2005. So I want to see, I'll start talking about finances and the economy before I introduce sentence 1 then. So we have more than 60% of the contribution. Okay, what contribution? Okay, in this case, since we're talking about a contribution there, we're going to want to leave it where it is. Okay, since we are introducing the contribution in sentence 1 and then talking about it in sentence 2, I know I need to leave it where it is. So my answer there for 9 would be A. Okay, because if I move it after sentence 2, I don't know what contribution I'm talking about in this sentence 2. So it has to come before sentence 2, therefore it has to be where it is now. Okay, we have more than 60% of the contribution should be came from commercial goods and services. Created, right? We see it's past tense by the word created, therefore we need to have the word came for number 8. All right, now we have this translate as excellent returns for an agency that received approximately $17.7 billion in tax dollars in 2014. This investment by taxpayers enhances not only the national economy, but also the United States' competitiveness in the international market. Moreover, the benefits of NASA funding extend beyond purely economic, as astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson indicated in his testimony before the U.S. Senate. For a penny on the dollar, we can transform the country from a sullen, dispirited nation weary of economic struggle to one where it has reclaimed its 20th century birthright to dream of tomorrow. Okay, we're asked at this point, the writer's considering adding the following sentence down in 10, so we got to keep reading. Tyson's expansive vision for the agency hints at another mission of NASA's, illuminated in his observation by Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell. You develop an instant global consciousness, people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. Our sentence is, in addition, NASA has facilities in Washington, D.C., Florida, Texas, California, and other states. That's really not important here. We don't talk on anything about its geography, so we wouldn't want to add this here. Okay, so we don't want to add this. Why? Well, it's not undermining any claim about the economic benefit, but it is blurring our paragraph's focus. So our answer there would be D for number 10. All right, now we got question 11. So we have, with the world population topping 7 billion, with the world population toppling 7 billion, humanity is in need of some perspective. Okay, I see I have one word beginning of my sentence followed by a comma, so I'm looking to transition. It says we should continue to support NASA not only for practical reasons, but also because it's a necessary vehicle for increasing awareness of how we can fulfill our responsibilities to the planet and to others. Okay, well that's showing, right? We have humanity's in need of perspective, and because humanity's in need for perspective, we should continue to support NASA. So that right there is a causal relationship. Right, so our answer here that has a causal relationship is therefore. Instead isn't causal, for example isn't causal, and however isn't causal. So our answer for 11 must be A. All right, now we got questions 12 to 22, professional development, shared responsibility. We have new theories, new practices too. Okay, now right here I can't just say new theories and also new practices, or new theories in addition to practices, because all of those are redundant with the word new. Okay. We can't say new practices after saying new theories, or also new practices, or in addition to practices. We want to be very, very efficient. We want to avoid redundancy, and all the answers A through C are redundant because they contain the words in addition or new and new, which we already state right here. So since we already said that, we just want to say practices. So our answer there would be D for number 12. All right, we have a list, new theories, practices, and technologies. We don't want to interrupt that by saying also new or in addition or new. So our answer there is going to be D for number 12. We have, in technologies, are transforming 21st century workplace at a lightning speed. To perform the job successfully in this dynamic environment, workers in many fields, from social services to manufacturing. Okay, I see I have a comma here. Obviously, this is going to be non-essential, so I need to have a comma after the word field. So my answer there is going to be C. So answer for 13 would be C. Okay, 14, we've got this practice of continued education, also known as professional development, benefits not only employees but also their employers. Okay, I have a transition word here. Meaningful professional development is a shared responsibility. It is the responsibility of employers to provide use of programs and the responsibility of employees to take advantage of the opportunities offered to them. All right, well, this is accordingly, right? Since it benefits employees and their employers, it's a shared responsibility. Okay, that makes sense. We wouldn't want to say nevertheless, we wouldn't want to say regardless, and we wouldn't want to say similarly, because this accordingly, we need to connect it to this previous sentence to show as a result, right? Accordingly here is meaning as a result. As a result of the benefits being shared between both of them, it's a shared responsibility. So that's showing that causal relationship, A. 15. Which choice best establishes the argument that follows? We have critics of employer-provided professional development argue that employees might consider a popular career path. No, I can't imagine that that's what's going to follow. We can go ahead and read on, though, just to check. So we have if employees find themselves falling behind in the workplace, these critics contend, I'm probably looking to combine these sentences, then it is the duty of those employees to identify and even pay for appropriate resources to address their deficiencies, deals with their flaws and shortcomings, allow them to meet their employer's needs in terms of the knowledge they are supposed to have, or show them how and why they are falling behind and what they should do about it. Okay, 17 here. What we're looking for is we're looking for an answer choice that is both efficient in word choice, also that matches tone. Okay, so we want to avoid something that would come off as abrasive here. Okay, so the correct answer here that's efficient and also not abrasive is address their deficiencies. Deal with their flaws and shortcomings. That's not really professional to say that. Also, it's pretty long. Same with D and same with A. They're both very, very long. They're not efficient. The only ones that are efficient in word choice and also have the correct tone here would be B. So I'd be looking at B as my correct answer for 17. Now we can go back up and answer 15 and 16. So 15, which choice best establishes the argument that follows? Well, these critics are saying that they have to be in charge of their own careers, right? The critics are really making that argument that if they're falling behind in their workplace, it's on them to go ahead and fix that with continued education. So the correct answer for 15 must be C. Now, if employees find themselves falling behind in the workplace, these critics contend then that it's the duty of those employees to identify and even pay for these expenses. Now, the key part here I see is the word if. That's telling me I have to have a comma after the word contend. So I'm looking at answer choice D as my correct answer for 16, because that the if at the beginning of my sentence tells me it's an introductory dependent clause, which means it has to have a comma at the end of it, which would come after contend. So 16 answer's got to be D. All right, 18. So we have this argument ignores research pointing to high employee turnover and training of new staff as significant costs plaguing employers in many fields. Forward-thinking employers recognize the importance of investing in the employees they have rather than hiring new staff when the skills of current workers get old and worn out. Okay, that's repetitive. Those two both mean the same thing. We have are no good anymore. That's very, very inefficient and not good tone. Have lost their charm. Also not good tone. Become obsolete. That's going to be our correct answer there. Okay, that is the only answer that matches tone and is also efficient in word choice. All right, now we got moving on. We got 19. The most common forms of professional development provided to employees include what? Okay, so the most common forms we got to get rid of professional development when determining our number. We see forms as plural. We need a plural verb. Plural verb is going to be include. Okay, so my answer there would be B for number 19. All right, so that one was matching a number. So we have coaching, mentoring, technical assistance workshops. Some employers utilize several approaches simultaneously, developing a framework that suits particular needs of their employees. Okay, now we have a transition or something showing a relationship, so connecting these two sentences. We have the figure illustrates a simple yet comprehensive professional development model created for special education personnel. Okay, around the same time, besides that and nevertheless, none of those are connecting those two sentences. So since none of them are connecting the two sentences correctly, we would want to use D for number 20. There's no way to connect those, at least not with the answer choices provided. As the figure suggests, receiving coaching and consultation is the overarching framework, while the opportunity to belong to professional networks. We're asked for which choice is most accurate here, so I actually just want to go take a look at take a look at this chart before I actually get started reading through all of these so I know what I'm looking for. So I see I have professional networks as my outer ring. I have coaching and consulting as a ring within professional networks. And then within that ring is the foundation and skill building workshops. So then what I'm going to be looking for is something that talks about professional networks being that overarching framework and then having that foundation and skill building workshops being at the core. So let's look at our options. We're just going to have to go A through D here. So we have receiving coaching and consulting as the overarching framework. No, because that's in the middle. Overarching framework has to be professional network. So A is wrong. B, participation in foundation and skill building is the overarching framework. No, that's the core. C, membership in professional network is the overarching framework, yes, within which staff receive coaching and consultation as well as the opportunity to attend foundation and skill building workshops, yes. D, receive coaching and consultation is the overarching framework, no. Answer has to be C for 21 then. Now we can go ahead and move on. We got 22, a recent trend in professional development that has provided advantages to both employers and employees is online instruction. From an employer perspective, the first and perhaps the most obvious advantage is the lower cost of online professional development compared with that of in-person workshops and trainings. Employers can also identify which employees have successfully completed instructional modules and which need to be offered additional training. All right, in this case, we don't want to have any punctuation after the word identify because there's no need for it. Any punctuation that does occur is splitting up identify and which. Okay, this verb right here, identify, needs to have a subject to act upon, which means we cannot split that up with a any sort of punctuation. So our answer would be C for number 22. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to quick go back, check, make sure I didn't skip any questions as I went through. Let's just make sure we got them all answered. If we do, we're going to go ahead and move on to our final two passages. I see I do, so I go ahead and move on to my final two passages. At this point, I'm pretty much on pace. I could maybe be moving a little bit faster, but I'm also explaining my answers. If I weren't explaining my answers to you, I would be finishing this in right around 15 to 20 minutes, but because I'm giving explanations, that's why it's taking me a little bit longer. So we have the evolution of slow food. We have in 1986, McDonald's caused a stir in Italy when it opened a restaurant next to Rome's historic Spanish Steps. Young on-the-go eaters were thrilled. Then we have a semicolon, specifically those who prized regional foods in Italy's convivial culture built on cooking and long meals, feared that the restaurant signaled the death of a way to life. All right, well, that is not providing that, okay? This is a contrast. So young on-the-go eaters were thrilled, but these people, they were feared that it signaled the death of a way of life. That's a contrast. We're going to be looking at the word however as our contrast word there. So 23, our answer there would be C. All right, moving on, we got questions 24. So we've got to counter the rise of fast food and fast life. A cohort of chefs, journalists, and sociologists spearheaded a slow food movement declaring loyalty to unhurried life. Okay, that is, we're going to want to have a comma after the word life because to counter the rise of fast food and fast life, that's an introductory modifier modifying a cohort of chefs, journalists, and sociologists. So my correct answer there would be A, no change for number 24. All right, now I got 25. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. The group's philosophy was connected to the tale of the tortoise and the hare, in which the tortoise wins the race. Should the writer make this addition here? Well, we haven't talked about anything about the tortoise and the hare, and introducing it back to a fairy tale really provides no meaningful thing here. We also already talked about slow versus fast. Connecting it to the tortoise and hare here, all that's going to do is blur our focus by introducing an idea that's not clearly explained. We have no connection to the tortoise and hare, therefore we don't want to add this here. All right, now we have option D, no, because it distracts from paragraph's emphasis on slow food movement's origins and beliefs. It's not distracting, it's just blurring our focus because it doesn't go on to be explained. So our answer there is C, not D for 25. Okay, from its beginning, the movement had opposed the standardization of taste that fast foods promote. Okay, this one right here is a tense question with the verb opposed. So I'm going to look around and see if I can find another thing of tense, right? We have they spearheaded a slow food movement. I see that that's past tense, so I wouldn't want to use the word had opposed. I would just want to say from its beginning the movement opposed. Has opposed, will oppose versus opposes. Okay, we don't have one of my answer choices, so I'm going to go back, take a look, see what I'm missing here. Okay, well, what I'm missing, we have from its beginning the movement. Let's take a look through here. So from its beginning, the movement will oppose would be future tense, so that's obviously going to be wrong. So we have has opposed versus had opposed. Okay, correct answer here is going to be has opposed because it's continuing to oppose it. Okay, had opposed would mean that it changed its mind, but we know that it doesn't. So has opposed would be our correct answer. That's going to be D. The standardization of taste that fast food chains promote. For example, McDonald's burger made in Boston tastes more or less the same as one made in Beijing. This consistency is made possible by industrial mass production. Slow food supporters, by contrast, back methods of growing and preparing food based on regional culinary traditions. When produced using traditional methods, goat cheese made in France tastes different from goat cheese made in Vermont. A goat ingests vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which along with other environmental factors such as altitude and weather, shapes. Okay, I need to offset this because it's not essential. So I'm going to look for an answer choice that offsets that. I see that answer choice B offsets it, so my answer there is going to be B. We want to offset that with commas because it's not essential. Okay, so our answer would be B for 27. All right, now we can go and move down. We got 28. If all foods were produced under the industrial model, we would have meals that are not very flavorful. Which choice most effectively supports the central point of the paragraph? Okay, that one right there, talking about foods that aren't very flavorful. That's not really the main point of our paragraph. The main point of our paragraph is talking about how we're going to end up losing flavors. Okay, we're going to lose flavors because everything's going to be monotonous and everything's going to be the same. Those industrial produced burgers, they may still have flavor. It's just there's going to lose a diversity. So we're going to look for answers going down here. We have traditional. The public would not be interested in learning about traditional foods. They don't care about learning. That's the key part that's wrong there. People would not be able to determine how a particular food was made. They don't care how it's made. And then D, consumers would lose this diversity of flavors. That's the main point here, is that they don't have as many options because it's all industrially mass produced. So we have during its early years, because it's the movement, so we can't use the word there. It's got to be its early years. So we can go ahead and take it. It's not going to be the word it is. It's going to be its, so our answer is going to be C for number 29. All right, now we got 30. During its early years, the movement also focused on the value of spending lots of time with friends and family during long meals, emphasizing the importance. I ran out of memory on my computer. I had to go delete some things. Now we can go ahead and get back into this. So I left off at 29. I'll be going back into 30. I also left off at about 18 minutes into it. So I'm going to have about 17 minutes left then to complete this. All right, so we have question 30 is where we left off. So we have talking about leisurely meals, right? So emphasizing the importance of preserving easygoing, slow. We got to go down. We've got pleasures. As the movement grew beyond Italy's borders, the slow food movement grew to more people. Emphasized pleasure, pictured or portrayed criticism for being elitist. Okay, it drew criticism right there. We wouldn't say portrayed, pictured criticism, or sketched it. It drew criticism for being elitist, right? Now we can go back up. We can answer 30, okay? So it talks about the importance of preserving these easygoing, focus on the value. Okay, focus on the value, spending lots of time with family and friends during long meals. Yes, we do go on to talk about that. Leisurely meals with friends and family, eating slowly in the company of loved ones. Okay, that's really, really inefficient and long. Joining friends as well as family, once again, long. Leisurely meals with friends and family, that's a little bit shorter. Spending lots of time with friends and family during long meals, that's also redundant. Okay, best answer here is B because it's the most efficient in word choice. So our answer for 30 there would be B. All right, now we can go move on. We answered 31. Now we're on 32. Critics have also asked if growing food using traditional methods as opposed to mass production can adequately and affordably feed the world. Okay, now we wouldn't say adequately and affordably can feed the world. Okay, that would be, we would have to have can in front of that. Same thing with D. Okay, also it is a question, so we have to have a question mark. So our answer there should be, actually no, we do not have to have a question mark. That is my bad. Okay, we don't want to have a question mark because this is a statement. These critics have asked this. Okay, this is a statement. The critics have asked it. So we do not want to have a question mark. So our answer there should be C for 32. Okay, all right, now we got question 33. So we've got, given the hectic pace of modern life, who among us has the time and resources for elaborate meals? Such questions, in addition to environmental concerns, are at the heart of perennial debates about food production. Over time, slow food has broadened its mission to focus on food that is good, clean, and fair for all. Members assert that food should be flavorful, carrying the properties of a particular region. It should be raised using environmentally sustainable practices that preserve biodiversity, and it should be accessible to all without exploiting the labors of those who produced it. Okay, now we're looking at a transition here. Slow food runs programs that support small-scale producers and marketing regional foods in a world where food corporations threaten to drive them out of the marketplace and homogenize food choices. Okay, well, this is definitely not by the same token. Okay, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. We wouldn't say nonetheless either. What we're trying to transition between here is that we're talking about people who believe that sustainable practices are preserving biodiversity. Okay, we're not saying something in short, but we are saying to these ends, right? They want to preserve biodiversity, and to these ends, they're supporting these small regional producers. So to these ends, to support that biodiversity, diversity of flavor, they're doing the following things. So our answer for 33 then should be C. All right, now we got our last passage. We're about 21 minutes in, so I'll try to get this done right around 4 or 5 minutes. So we have, was the hoax a hoax? For an hour on the evening of October 30, 1938, Orson Welles and other performers from the Mercury Theater flooded the airwaves with alarming news bulletins about a Martian invasion supposedly occurring in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. They were performing a radio play adapted from The War of the Worlds, a science fiction novel by H.G. Wells. The next day, a front-page headline in the New York Times declared radio listeners in panic, taking war drama as fact. Okay, the front-page headline in the New York Times declared, and then a comma and then quotation marks. Okay, that all looks pretty good to me. I don't see anything wrong with that. We don't want to have a comma after the word headline, so we can get rid of both of those. We don't want to have a comma after New York Times. The answer there should be A. That's grammatically correct. Okay, next up I got 35. Writer wants to add a supporting detail and indicate the story was widely reported. What choice best does this? We have the Times article claimed many people fled their homes and that police stations have been swapped with calls. Okay, that's not showing that the story was widely reported, so answer A would be wrong. B, other newspapers also ran stories claiming that the broadcast had incited mass hysteria. That also shows that it's widely supported, but I don't know if it's a perfect choice. Let's look at C and D. So C and D, we've got 2013, many newspapers and magazines feature articles about the 75th anniversary. No, because that's at modern times. We want to talk about back then. The Times was then and is now one of the most popular sources. No, so answer then will be B for number 35. Okay, now we got 36. We have the version of the events persisted and the legend became that Wells broadcasts had as many as 12 million people fearing. Okay, we want to use the correct tense here. This is obviously a tense question. Had as many as 12 million people fearing that Martians had invaded Earth. Correct answer there should be C. That's just checking on tense. How recently, however, scholars have questioned the accuracy of this legend, suggesting the degree of public hysteria has been grossly exaggerated. The authors of an article published in October 2013 go as far as to, it should be, go so far as to assign blame for the distortion of the newspaper industry. Okay, we would go so far as to assign blame. We wouldn't say go so far to assign blame. We would have to have the word as there. That's an idiom question. We need to know that we have to have the word as after that. So that's an idiomatic question. Idiomatic just meaning basically what you would say naturally. Okay, 38, we have a transition, obviously. So we have Jefferson Pooley and Michael Sokolow, both professors of communication studies, argue that the newspaper industry sought to discredit the newly emerging technology of radio, which was cutting into newspapers' profits. And then we are connecting, looks like we're going to connect these two. Yep, so we have the newspaper industry tried to do this by portraying the new medium as irresponsible. Okay, we tried to, should just have by portraying. So we should have a comma after profits, and then we should have this right here. We already say this. Okay, so we just want to say by portraying the new medium as irresponsible. So we want to cut out everything I just cut out. So we should have profits and then a comma, and then we should have by portraying. So we've got answer choice D for number 39. All right, now moving back up, we got to answer still 38. All right, so 38, we've got transition in between the two. So we have in the article, next, on one hand, or at this time. Okay, so before that sentence, we were talking about how they, the authors of an article published in October 13 talk about assigning blame in the article. Then is what we talk about, right? They make their argument in that article, so our best transition there would be C for number 38. Okay, now we got 40, which choice best establishes the main idea of the paragraph. All right, so this is obviously I see a 1, so I'm actually going to go find that sentence I have to place real quick. Sentence 4 says, sentence 4, just because some people found the broadcast unsettling, the authors contend, doesn't mean that they believed it and reacted with real terror. All right, so I have proof of ulterior motives is scarce, consequently weakening Poole's and Sokolow's argument. Which choice best establishes the main idea of the paragraph? I got to read on then. For instance, C. Hooper ratings indicate that a mere 2% of households had tuned into the broadcast. Pooley and Sokolow also call into question the validity of an off-site report that was based on a survey conducted 6 weeks after the broadcast. According to this report, 1 million people indicated that they had been frightened by the broadcast. Okay, at this point, I'm going to want to place sentence 4 after sentence 5 then, because it talks about frightened, and then we talk about how just because they were frightened does not mean that they actually reacted with anything. So our answer there should be C for number 42. Or hang on a minute, nope. This should not be after sentence 5. Because in sentence 7, we say, furthermore, Pooley and Sokolow noted that the survey conflated being frightened, disturbed, or excited by the program with being panicked. Okay, so we want to place it after sentence 7 because sentence 4 talks about how just because people found it unsettling, the author contends, doesn't mean that they believed it and reacted with the real terror. So that should come after sentence 7 when we make that argument about frightened, not meaning that they actually reacted with real terror. So we have, according to this report, 1 million people indicated that they were frightened by the broadcast. Ratings, however, revealed that far fewer than 1 million people had been listening to the broadcast. Okay, many less than wouldn't be good here, much less than, much fewer than. Correct answer for 41, we would really want to say far fewer than. Okay, this one really is just kind of an idiomatic question, making sure that you're just saying what you would naturally say on 41. All right, so 40, which choice best establishes the main idea of the paragraph? Main idea of the paragraph, evidence does suggest that the reports of the panic have been overblown. Yes, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how reports of this panic have been overblown. So our answer there should be B. Okay, we talk about how people didn't actually react with real terror. Not many people, or not as many people as people think, were actually listening to the broadcast. Okay, now we go down. We got 42, 43. It looks like we just got 43 and 44 to go here. Okay, so we got 43. Pooley and Sokolow describe a more likely scenario. Most people who heard the broadcast understood they were listening to a piece of fiction, but some, being influenced by the sensationalized news coverage afterward, later remembered being more afraid than they had been. Okay, but some, they were influenced. Okay, we wouldn't say that, but some influenced. Okay, we wouldn't want to have a comma between that. So our correct answer there should be D for number 43, right? We would just say, or I'm sorry, we would not want to say D for number 43. Okay, why? Because we wouldn't want to say, but some influenced by the sensationalized news coverage afterward. Remember, okay, the influence here is coming back and it's modifying that some. Since it's modifying it, we want to have a comma after the word some, since we're modifying it with the word influenced. So our correct answer for 43 should be C, right? We want to understand that that's a modifier question. So we want to take that modifier influenced and we want to bring it back and put it on some. So D would be incorrect because then we're not modifying it. So we want to have that comma before the modifier influenced. So these researchers also suggest that not unlike people who got caught up, okay, not unlike, which just means like, okay, that doesn't mean that that's wrong. If we have the word like, I'd rather use that, but I see I have unlike, not like, and different from. So if these researchers also suggest that like people who got caught up in the excitement story when reading about it in the newspaper, the American public may have been willing to embrace the legend because of its appeal to the imagination, okay, that needs to be like, not unlike, not like, and not different from, because that's showing something similar. So our correct answer there would be A. So it looks like I finished that in right around 28 minutes. Keep in mind though, if I was not having to give answer explanations to you verbally, I would be completing that in right around anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, because it's just these verbal explanations take a while, so I can explain how to get to the correct answer. But hopefully you see kind of my pacing, my thoughts, my strategy on that. Keep in mind, I did not look at this passage before I went through this, so this was a realistic version of me going through the text and seeing where to look and things like that. So hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you kind of get a good idea of what I'm looking for, what I'm looking at. 43, like I said, I messed up a little bit there. I circled D at first, and D would be incorrect. We need to have a comma after the word some because the word influence is going back and it's modifying the word some. I also, on question 42, right, at first I was thinking after sentence 5, because sentence 5 talks about that frightened, but then when I went down I saw in sentence 7 we talk about conflating frightened, disturbed, or excited with actually being panicked. So a better placement for sentence 4 then would be after sentence 7, right? So sometimes you'll have that where it looks like it would be good and well placed after one sentence, and then as you read on you realize it would be better placed after another sentence. If that happens, just make sure that you go ahead and put it after that better sentence that you found as you read on. So in that case it was after I read on to sentence 7, I saw it would be better placed after sentence 7. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. At this point what I'd be doing if I were taking the SAT writing section is I would be going through and I would be matching everything to my answer sheet, right? So I'd go back up and I would just start from the beginning. I would just make sure that everything that I circled is also bubbled into my answer sheet. So that should only take you right around 60 seconds, right? You just quickly glance at each one, make sure that you had A on one, A on the other, B on one, right? And you want to use that bubbling strategy as well, where you kind of look and you say, okay, I wrote, for example, on this page, I have B, A, C, C, B. I just look on my answer sheet, B, A, CCB, make sure I have that, and then I move on, take a look at the next one, right? You get that done in right around 60 seconds. At that point, you go back and you take a look at any questions that you were unsure of, make sure that you got any questions that you were unsure of correct, look around for any clues if you're struggling on one, look around for verbs, tenses, numbers, things like that to help make sure that you're getting the correct answer there. You can read through more on words or on questions where you're asked about which sentence to insert and things like that. So at this point, you're just going through and you're checking any questions that you started, right? So anything you were unsure of, any questions that you had to guess on, you're just going back and working through those with that time that you have left. Okay, so like I said, my video cut out because I ran out of storage on my computer, so I believe that I, at this point, have about 4 minutes left. So like I said, I'd just be going through checking any questions I start. If there was anything I was unsure of, I'd be going back and I'd be working through those. So for this one, there's really no questions that I'm unsure of. I'm confident that I got every question right? And then so yeah, so these are the answers, these are correct. But yeah, if you were doing this, you want to make sure that you're just going through any questions that you're unsure of, make sure that you're going through checking them, make sure that you got them right. Overall though, you just want to make sure that you're finishing in right around that 25 to 30 minute mark. If you're doing that, you're in a pretty good spot. And you're just going back and checking your answers. So at this point, it looks like I've got right around 4 or 3 minutes left. So there's really not a whole lot I can do to help you at this point. At this point, what you'd just be doing is you'd just be checking any questions you were unsure of and things like that. So hopefully you see the pacing that I'm using. If I was using an answer sheet, a bubble sheet, I don't know if in the future they're going to be taking the SAT online. I know that there's been a lot of talk about that and how it's likely that in the next 2 years the SAT will be online. If it is online, then obviously you're not going to have to worry about transferring things to your answer sheet. I wouldn't imagine. I would imagine that you'd just be clicking it on the same question. So in that case, you'd just be going through and looking at the questions rather than having to transfer answers to your answer sheet anyways. If it's paper and pencil though, obviously you're going to have to transfer your answers to your answer sheet. I talked about the bubbling strategy in a video a while back. But yeah, overall, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you were able to gain an understanding of what I look for as well as pacing. And yeah, so hopefully it was helpful. At this point, I think it looks like I've got about 2 minutes left. I'm just going to go ahead and start the outro because at this point, rather than just spend the last 2 minutes rambling on, I'll just let you go do something else. So, as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If this video was helpful, there'll be a donation link in the description when it's up and running. Any private SAT tutoring I'm doing, any private college admissions consulting I'm doing will be linked in the description. And as always, make sure to like, subscribe, share. Have a good day.